be with all of you virtually on this rainy day. I'm going to call the meeting to order. And Joyce, could you do a roll call for us?
Sure. Amagashi, Cleary,
Here.
Gorman,
Here.
Maldonado,
Here.
McKee, Mertens,
Here.
Perry,
Here.
Farmer Eden.
Here.
And Shimming is going to be a few minutes late, so we have a quorum.
Great. Awesome. First item on our agenda is minutes from our June 13th meeting. Do I have a motion to approve?
So move.
Second.
A second.
We have a first and a second. Great. Let's approve the minutes. Everyone in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Okay. The next thing is public appearances not on the agenda. Do we have any of the general public?
We do not have anybody. We do have a visitor in the council chambers, but he does not wish to speak at this time, so we're good to move on.
Okay. Resolutions and ordinances. Nothing on that agenda item, or do we have anything there?
You went out of order, Olivia.
I'm sorry. Introduction of new member.
So
Nate.
I am going to start off by welcoming Nate to our group. I met Nate several years back, Olivia, when we were working on the affordable housing video. He was instrumental in helping us find a couple that could talk about their experience. Nate is...
That Nate. Oh, wow.
We got Nate. So Nate is, I think he's called a community coordinator, but I call him a social worker because he does phenomenal things for his tenants at his apartment complexes that he works with. So I'll let him tell us a little bit about himself, but we're really excited to have you, Nate.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Honored to be here. Hello, everybody. Everyone that is here physically, everybody that is here virtually. Truly an honor to be here. Thank you. Yes, my name is Nate Farmer Eden. I have worked for Seven Oaks Apartments as well as Maple Lawn. The 9th of this month made 8 years now. Role of community coordinator. To date, actually, I can backtrack a little bit. When I initially took on the role, we've got 254 units in Madison, and then that 81 units, which is Maple Lawn and Fitchburg. We sort of developed the role by using a needs analysis and assessment to where we went door to door, and I met with each one of our resident tenants, families, and individuals alike. We sort of created a curriculum and a program set to be able to help to give back. I call it kind of like a growth and development or personal growth and development plans. To date, we do anything from after-school programs. We just had our 8th annual backpack giveaway, which we partner with Madison Police Department for. We do adult computer classes, nutrition classes, a plethora of different things. Pretty much, you can think of it, we kind of got it going. We work with Second Harvest to bring out food distribution bi-weekly as well. We do some work with Dane County Court 2.0 program for residents that are having issues with being able to pay rent on time. Just a ton of different things. So it's truly an honor to be here. Thank you all so much for having me.
Nate, I have to say, it's so good to see you. It's been years since we made that video together. And I actually see it every once in a while. And we're both in it. But it's great to see you, and I'm so glad you're joining us on the advisory committee. This is wonderful. Okay, now back to the proper order. Does anyone have any questions they want to ask Nate, or should we move on? Okay. No. Public appearances, we don't have any public appearances. Resolutions and ordinances, I guess they would be listed if they were on here. So we will skip to this number 7, and we're going to get a multi-family condition assessment update. We got an initial assessment last time, which is obviously the bulk of our minutes, which I thought were very helpful. I've not ever had that before, and so it was really great to hear about or read and hear how Fitchburg is sort of categorizing things, so I'm really looking forward to this update. So I'll turn it over to you.
So I'm going to give a little bit of overview. So at our last meeting, we had Jack Pearson from our building inspection department give us a overview of the multifamily condition from a building inspection perspective. And today we have Chief Polvemacher. Thank you, Chief, for coming out. He's going to give us an overview of calls to service and then give us a perspective from more of the life safety and some of the things that his staff has noticed as they've been out doing their fire inspections. So looking forward to hearing from Joe.
All right, well, first of all, thanks for the invite. One of the things that I wanted to put out there, first of all, I wanted to make sure that I wasn't feeding back. So, Scott, I did all right with my microphone, I guess. The other thing is that I think one of the things that people don't necessarily appreciate about the fire department is we're not all about emergency response. We're also about prevention, trying to get things out there so that we hopefully avoid the need for response. So from a fire department perspective, there's a number of different things that I want to call into question, or at least bring your attention to. I'm not going to really share a lot in the way of occupying too much of your time. I do want to leave some time at the end for questions in the event that there's something specific that you need answers to. First of all, I think you need to know what a multifamily residential unit is, and many of you already know this answer, but typically anything over 3 and over of the residential units. So if we have one building that has 3 or more residential units, we consider that to be multifamily. And there's a number of different things that fall into play there. Once it becomes multifamily, then there are inspection elements that we need to follow from a fire department standpoint. In the way of code review and in the way of plan review, there's other aspects that we start taking into consideration from a life safety perspective. So it's important to note that right off the bat. Your side-by-sides, your duplexes typically don't fall in the realm, although they truly are multifamily. They're not something that we as a fire department would inspect or get involved with at any particular level other than response. So one of the things that I wanted to bring up is why we have a particular interest in multifamily units. A lot of that really just has to do with the fact that it's going to affect multiple families in short order. One fire is not just going to put one family at a disadvantage if it was a single family unit. It has the potential of impacting dozens of families all at once. So it makes sense for us to be aware of some of the things that involve and impact health and safety. There's a significant displacement issue if we don't necessarily get on top of certain things. One fire can displace that, like I said before, dozens of families within a matter of an evening. And then we also know that especially when we start talking about lower income families, sometimes one of the first things to go is the renter's insurance. So their entirety, their belongings, the entirety of their belongings can be jeopardized as a result of not having the needed insurance to be able to cover those things. And there are certain, many leases address the need for renter's insurance, but the method of them being enforced is not necessarily the same across the board. So then all of a sudden we have an issue where a homeowner or a renter is not protected at any specific level. So it does make sense for us to stay on top of the safety and the prevention aspects. Some of the fire department priorities, when we start looking at new construction and existing construction when we're out there inspecting, we like to address access. We want to be able to get to the building, and we need to make sure that people can get out of the building in order to address life safety. Not only do we have an interest in getting in and fighting a fire and providing life safety techniques, it's equally important for somebody to be able to get out of that building and away from the hazard. From a water supply standpoint, a lot of times this is why you see what you see at the city level from a zoning enforcement standpoint. The plan associated with development does impact something like this with water supply. If we had construction going up all over the city without consideration to the zoning, we could very easily put a building in jeopardy and its residents in jeopardy as a result of not having the appropriate water flow. So hydrant location is important to us, water flow is important to us, and the accessibility of that life-saving tool. From a fire suppression standpoint, we have significant interest in things like sprinklers and standpipes, fire department connections, things that allow us to keep the fire at bay as we're responding in. It's important for us to be able to control that fire sooner than later. If we don't control the fire, we could find something that is well beyond our control to be able to get in and fight that fire. Another thing that helps us out in that regard is fire alarms and notification. So not just that the building has fire alarms, but then how is the fire department being notified? Is that a central alarm company? Is that something that's only addressed locally and then somebody has to dial 911? Those are the things that do impact our ability to quickly address the fire at the incipient stages. So how is Fitchburg unique or different? Well, one of the things that you need to be aware of is back in 2013, Wisconsin Act 270 started to address something known as the Universal Building Code. And it sort of hobbled us a little bit in the way that we were able to enforce things locally. It worked in the benefit of the developer because then from municipality to municipality, the building code was the same, and it was easier for them to submit plans and things like that. Where it gets to be a disadvantage is the fact that not all fire departments are created equal. Not all fire departments are staffed the same way. And so when we start looking at things that maybe work well in a major metropolitan area, it's not necessarily going to provide us with the same effect in the sense that the Fitchburg Fire Department needs to be able to take advantage of some other things that are enforced through the ordinance. There were a couple of things that were grandfathered through the municipal ordinance. We were able to address certain fire detection, prevention, and suppression issues that were taken care of or eliminated as a result of the Universal Building Code. And we submitted that in order to have that take effect by January 26th of 2015. So then I always get the but, why? Why is it different? Why does it have to be different? I already talked about the fact that the fire departments aren't created equal, but at the same time, if that is the case, then we have to have certain mechanisms that are in place. Technology, technique, pre-fire planning, those are the types of things that we will take advantage of as a smaller department. We may not be able to surround it with people, but there may be certain things that we can put in place in advance to be able to combat and control that fire. And so that's why it's important for us to address things that maybe are a little bit different than what we see in Madison, for example. That's one thing that we typically see and we hear on a regular basis is the fact that, well, as a developer, we're able to do this differently in Madison, and I would agree with that. So staff our fire department the same way that you staff Madison's fire department, and we might be able to have the same ordinance, but we have to do things a little bit differently. Oh, sure, absolutely. So, for example, we had a recent development go in that was missed in plan review that allowed grills on the balcony. In Madison, you can do that to a certain extent, depending on what type of fire prevention and fire protection is available. We typically, as a city of Fitchburg, has not allowed that. We don't allow that because of the fact that it takes a considerable effort to be able to combat that fire right away. So what we do instead of allowing it is say, no, that's not allowed. Have a communal grill available in a courtyard area away from the building, and then therefore we don't have to worry about a fire on a balcony. Because our staffing every day is about 9 people. 9 people between 2 stations that respond out. So where we're getting our support is from neighboring municipalities. Now, Madison might be able to have upwards to 20 firefighters available on the initial response and within the first 5 minutes. In order for us to have 20 firefighters on scene, you're talking about 15 to 20 minutes out because we rely on our neighbors. So I'm just giving you an example of one thing that we've addressed in that regard. Another thing is for a while, the city of Fitchburg was enforcing a retroactive sprinkler rule. So if you bought an apartment complex, we asked that it be brought up to current day standard for that reason. We were taking into consideration the life safety aspect. Because one of the things that most people do not consider, especially as renters, is the fact that fire prevention does or does not exist. So those protective systems, many assume that they're there, and only after they sign a lease are they well aware of the fact that maybe they don't have that. So we represent the best interests of the community, as well as trying to consider the financial impact that it has on the property owner. So, here's this picture that I provide you, the picture worth 1,000 words, right? There are 2 examples there. One is the sprinkler activation that was able to control a fire at the stove, right? The next one is actually also a comparison. Those fires, those 2 fires depicted in one picture, happened a week apart. The one on the left is in an apartment complex, a unit that had a sprinkler. The one on the right, similarly sized building, had no sprinkler. So the damage is significant. And I know that there's oftentimes some concern about the fact that if a sprinkler goes off, there's going to be water damage. And there might be. But I can tell you that water damage is typically limited to the unit and the units below it, versus smoke damage that goes everywhere and it can affect every unit. And if the smoke impacts every unit, we could have displacement of the entire complex versus having to displace 1 or 2 families. That's significant for the property owner, and that's significant for insurance, and that's significant for a number of different reasons. So why do we like the idea of fire sprinklers? Because of the fact that it does give us the ability not only to fight the fire at the incipient stages, but also to get people back into their units so they can sleep in their own bed. That's significant. So just some things to think about. And here's another thing to think about. This is Fitchburg-centric information. This is stuff that I just pulled from our annual report. Cooking-related fires in Fitchburg last year accounted for 26 of our 83 fire incidents. And of those cooking-related incidents, about 80%, if not more, were associated to multifamily residential. There's a number of different reasons for that. I mean, we have people who are working 3rd shift who come home, make a dinner, then sit down on their couch and fall asleep. I mean, these are accidents, truly accidents, but that's why you would put something like a sprinkler system in place to be able to combat that fire and to hopefully prevent any loss of life. So it's just a really good characterization of what happens within the city of Fitchburg specifically. So what else can we do? And I think speaking to this group, these are things that you already know. Working with property management to address things like building maintenance, tenant considerations, and lease enforcement are huge. Probably one of the biggest impacts on fire prevention is how well the property is maintained, no doubt. We come in later with fire inspections to make sure that codes are enforced and we identify those life and safety hazards. But ultimately, what it boils down to is the day in, day out, the people who are there on a regular basis to be able to see things that need to be controlled before they become problems. And then building inspection is another one. I mean, as a fire department, we work directly with building inspection to ensure that whatever that occupancy is, it's done in accordance with zoning. And when we do plan review, it reflects current day building practices and the types of ordinances and standards that are in place. So we also participate in plan review to address some of the things that are specific to fire protection and inspection. And with that, I'm just going to pause and ask if there's any questions. Yes, sir.
It's not a question, it's more of a comment and just kind of reinforcement of what you said at the beginning. So like 12, 13 years ago, I lived on Guilford Road, and we had an apartment unit fire. It started at like 1 in the morning, and it was an 8-unit fire. And we were the only ones out of everybody with renter's insurance. And it just made a significant difference. And I wasn't the one that initiated. I was like in my late 20s and hadn't thought about any of that. My, now wife was the person who initiated it. And I'm just a plea to anybody watching this, like, get renter's insurance if you rent, because we were able to cover all of our costs, whereas like everybody else had to start from scratch.
It's the one thing that we notice as a fire department is people don't necessarily appreciate the need for something like that because they really truly don't think that it's ever going to happen to them. People are more concerned about theft, law enforcement, robbery, those types of things than they are of emergency medical and fire, because of the fact that it's one of those things that happens, but they don't necessarily see the impact because it's not driven home at the same level. So until that happens, yes, people like yourself, your family, you know the value because you've lived the experience. Many people don't. We see it regularly as a fire department, but because we're called to those incidents. Those that don't live it regularly, they take that risk, and it's unfortunate because it's really hard to replace those things that are replaceable when that financial assistance isn't available. And renter's insurance, just speaking from my perspective, isn't that expensive, not in comparison to some of the other things that we spend money on.
I mean, just driving the point home, we had a place to stay for 3 months. Like, we were actually put in a hotel. So that, like, is even more so when you have to just think about, like, am I going to have to trouble my, friends or family, or maybe not be able to have that option versus, like, being put in a hotel for, a little while. It's just like a world of difference. So, yeah. That the insurance provided, exactly.
So the other thing that I want to say, and then I'll get to your question real quick, but the other thing that I want to say here is there's a lot of people who say, well, I appreciate the value of fire safety. I have a clean home. But that's one of the reasons why, from a multifamily perspective, we enforce it at the level that we do, differently than we do single family, because with a single family residential, the people that are affected are the people who are typically the ones that had the fire. In a multifamily situation, somebody else might have the fire and everybody is affected. So even if you do maintain a clean house and you're fire safe and you follow all the things that you need to follow, you're really truly not sure what happens in the rest of those units. So you want to practice something that provides you the protection that you need. Yes, sir.
Can I just, can we take the presentation down so we could all see each other a little bit better?
You don't like my question slide?
No, I love your question. And it was a great presentation, but if we could, is that okay? Does that
I'll stop sharing right now.
revisit the okay, great.
That was a great question, though. Probably because of that slide.
Yeah, that I will say, I completely appreciate that conversation around renters insurance. That really, really made me think a lot about, when we're talking about affordable workforce housing, what people are having to go without. And that story, Joe, about your experience 15 years ago was also very helpful and illuminating. Nate has a question and I have a question, or just a comment, but yeah, Nate, do you want to go?
Certainly. Thank you so much. To kind of piggyback off of what Joe was talking about, and first and foremost, I want to say thank you so much for your service. Thank you so much to your staff. Greatly appreciated all around Fitchburg.
Thank you for letting us do it.
Our pleasure. Just out of curiosity, and I understand that you meet with property management, you meet with developers in the midst of multifamily housing being constructed and developed. When it comes to tenant and tenant relations, and I fully understand with only 9 people on staff at any given time, do you guys do any type of community engagement for the educational side of things to try to help mitigate things before they actually happen?
Yeah, that's a really good question. There's a number of different ways that we can do that and have done that. There's other things that we can do in order to make that relationship even stronger. From a community engagement standpoint, we try to address things as the need arises, first and foremost. So once there has been an emergency, we obviously reach out. In advance of that emergency, we try to foster a decent relationship with the property owners during fire inspections. I mean, one of the instructions that I have for our fire inspectors is our priority is obviously code enforcement, but I think the first thing that we need to do is have a good public relations campaign. So get out there, know that we are approachable, and instead of seeing this as some type of limitation or enforcement situation, maybe use it as a method of education so that we can bring those safety mechanisms into play. Just know that we're there for the property owner as much as we are for the resident. So that's one way, or two actually. Another thing that we're working on, and so far we've addressed it through our budget, we have a chief's position that has gone unfunded for a matter of what amounts to 7 years now. It was the Division Chief of Prevention and Inspection. That chief was in charge of plan review, to set up things like our inspections to make sure they're scheduled, to be the primary point of contact for things like plan review and then code enforcement and reinspection, which then would allow that person to go out and foster these relationships on a more professional level, not a response level. It's more of a preactive level to be able to have a name and face recognition before the emergency. So those are some of the things that we're working on. We see the value of that community engagement and want to participate in that even more than we do right now.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Love to connect.
All right. Okay.
Joe, I'd first like to thank you for that presentation. That was really great and very helpful. And it made me think about, housing in a way that I don't think about. So I really appreciate that. One question I had is there a type of building or a size of multifamily that typically sees more fires or fire damage? Is it age related?
So typically where we're seeing most of our multifamily responses is in the way of anything that's 8 to 12 units or more. Things that happen in the other units, those are typically things like row houses, side-by-sides. The impact isn't as great, and quite frankly, In many situations, we're talking about a situation where there's maybe a little bit more accountability because of the one-on-one between property management and the renter. So there's a number of things that fall into play there, but it seems like the larger the complex gets, the more likely we are to see activity, and a lot of that has to do with the interaction of property management.
Would you say it happens more in absentee landlords? I mean, all properties have to be managed, but is it more in places that don't have absentee landlords, or is there more? I'm just trying to kind of see if there are any trends or patterns.
Yeah, let me see if I can dissect your question a little bit. Are you suggesting that the larger the unit, the more likely we are to respond to it? Is that it?
Well, I think you mentioned that was the case, but is there a difference between owners who are local versus owners who are not here?
Oh, well, okay, so here's a good point to be had. The local owners are the ones who have a tendency of being more present. There's an ownership issue versus those that reside out of state or in some situations out of country. It's harder for us to get people on site when there's been a problem, or if we know there's a problem that needs correcting. So having local management and having an office available on site makes that easier for us to get in front of any potential issues. So I know that we can't necessarily mandate that, but at the same time, once a problem has occurred, if we continue to see problems, well, that's when we'll start getting involved more on the enforcement issue versus the correction and an education standpoint.
And do most of the larger units have people on site, or is it an exception rather than the rule?
If I were to give you a statistic just off the top of my head, without any reinforcement or data, it's about a 50-50. So there are some larger units that don't necessarily have an office on site, and then we have to wait for property management to come in because they're managing multiple properties. And so they have an office off-site that allows them to be more regional.
Thank you.
Joe, I'm going to fire a couple questions at you.
Fire? I like it. I see where you're going with
No
that.
pun intended here.
Yeah.
But,
Dad jokes, I've got them.
as far as retrofitting an apartment building, I know Maple Lawn did it. Do you have an estimate of like what the cost is to do it, new construction versus a retrofit per unit?
So I don't have the comparison that I can get for you, and those numbers are changing. It is more cost effective to do it while you're building the property versus retrofitting it. However, the retrofitting packages that are available are getting easier and easier to implement. There was a point in time when Fitchburg was enforcing that with the passage of the act that I had mentioned. It became a non-enforceable issue, so we had to stop. The reason behind it was to try to control those fires sooner than later. I can tell you that those complexes that have fire protection in place have already experienced the value of having that in place, because you can control the damage associated with a sprinkler activation to tens of thousands of dollars versus hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions, depending on the size of the building. So there's something to be said about retrofitting a complex after the building has been built, if you're truly looking at life safety, property conservation, and staying in business. I mean, one of the things that we recognize as a municipal fire department is the fact that we are able to be a municipal fire department based on tax collection. And if those buildings don't exist because they have burnt down, that's one less thing that helps support the services that are available through the city. So it makes a whole lot of sense to be able to protect that from a municipal standpoint, but also from a housing standpoint, knowing how many people could actually be affected during and after a fire. Your mic is off.
Any other questions?
Do you have any idea how many units we have that aren't sprinklered?
We have about, anything that's constructed now, so anything brand new is going up with sprinklers.
Okay.
Those units that were constructed, I believe, before 1980, I have to look at the, I obviously wasn't here in Fitchburg. 1980 was 10 years old, so what I will do is I will give you an exact number, and I can share that with you, that you can then share with this group, with this committee, to make sure that you have that number. But anything that's brand new is being constructed with sprinklers and fire protection. The older units, once again, probably looking at about 50 to 60% of the older units that don't have them. Yes, sir.
Going a little further on community outreach, what does that typically look like with the department? Beyond just the having to sort of react to fires. I'm thinking like Madison, all the events that have been happening, or different fairs throughout Fitchburg.
Yeah, so one of the things that we try to do, and one of the things that became apparent, is there's some areas of our city that don't necessarily have equal access to the fire station. Could be a number of different things, from transportation issues to work schedule. We do know that when we conduct open houses at our fire station, a good portion of the community that represents our northern communities isn't necessarily coming in. So what we've had to do is try to put the show on the road type of thing, where we bring our open house out to the communities. But even there, the turnout has been less than dynamic. So what we try to do is interact as we have the ability to interact. And that could be during a response, that could be during a fire inspection. It's when we're there regardless. Why not start a conversation about the things that impact fire safety and our ability to respond? And then just always leaving that conversation open, knowing that people can reach out at any time and talk with us about their concerns, and know that we're going to follow up with them. So those are a couple of ways. The other thing is when we do training, we try to train in areas where people within our community are going to see it, and then maybe stop and ask questions because we're accessible. I mean, let me take that one step backwards. We're always accessible. It's whether people think we're accessible or not. It's the perception of accessibility. So
the thing that first jumps in my mind is like when there've been a lot of car thefts lately, right? Like the police have that flyer that says, is there something similar with regards to like get renter's insurance, do these things, like some that somebody could just easily see posted at like the entrance to the doors to the new fountains or something like that?
Yeah, great point. Another thing, not only those constant gentle reminders, but also when somebody signs their lease, to be able to have a packet from the fire department that says these are our ordinances, and these are things that you're going to want to consider in order to practice fire safety in a multifamily situation. So those are things that we've actually worked on before with certain property managers, and there's other things that we can do to reinforce that concept. Yeah, no problem.
Any other questions, folks, comments, thoughts?
So I just have one comment maybe for Joe, so he kind of gets an idea of what we're thinking here. So we are looking at some programming for use of our TID funds when we close out TID number 4 next year. And one of the things as our group of professionals here has talked about is programming for upgrades to some of the multifamily properties. It could be anything from facade to mechanicals to new kitchens, or it could be fire safety. So we're going to be doing some outreach, and that's one of our agenda items tonight. Is there something from a fire department perspective that you think we should include as we start gathering data from some of these owners and managers?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the data that we need to collect is, and some of it we have, some of it's self-reported, but knowing who's got what for fire protection, understanding that those systems not only are installed but then maintained, making sure that their residents are aware of the emergency procedures that are involved in any type of alarm activation, or if there is the activation of a sprinkler head. What does that all mean, and how can they better serve themselves through an identified process or procedure? But I think identifying where those unprotected multifamily residential units are is a really good start, and to be able to identify how we might be able to positively impact the protection of those units. I'm a big advocate for sprinklers. It doesn't necessarily put the fire out, but it keeps the fire at bay to the point where we can go in and extinguish that fire. The fire department is well aware of the fact that even in new construction, we have had some issues with the way that buildings are constructed today. Lightweight construction, although very strong in non-fire conditions, under a fire condition is suspect and subject to failure quickly. And I'll just give you, I'll paint this picture for you, because when I became involved in the fire service in 1988, and it's over 30 years ago, I was told that I had upwards to 30 minutes to fight a fire, from the time that the fire started to the time that I could get in. And as a volunteer firefighter at the time, it took us a good, sometimes 15, 20 minutes to get on scene. But we still had 10 minutes to fight the fire, and that's in legacy construction. That's your 2x6s, 2x8s, 2x10s, 2x12s. Legacy construction stood up very well to fire conditions, even if not protected by something like lath and plaster or drywall. Now we started entering into the realm of lightweight construction, trusses, engineered I-beams, things of that nature. And anything that is unprotected at this point, and you think about where your fires are happening today, it's in those areas, typically mechanical of nature, that we see some of our biggest concerns. And although somebody might have a finished basement, tell me who finishes their furnace room. Most people do not, right? So I would like to, first of all, give you an impression of some of the issues that we have as a fire department. When a fire starts in a situation that has lightweight construction, 6 minutes is what we have before we start seeing collapse. And that's when the fire starts. That's not when the building material has been impacted by flame. It's just when it starts getting impacted by heat. Because think about what makes up an engineered I-beam, for example. It's 2 2x2s and OSB in between. And the OSB is basically a bunch of pieces of wood glued together. So when impacted by heat, that glue starts to melt. The OSB starts to delaminate. It starts to off-gas, and we start actually contributing to fire conditions. Once that OSB lets go, the only thing that's holding your floor is a 2x2. So within 6 minutes, Now, once again, let me paint that picture for you. If we get a fire, let's say the fire alarm goes off right away when the fire starts, which typically doesn't happen. It takes a good 1-2 minutes for the smoke detector to go off, the smoke alarm. So let's say it happens right away, and the people wake up and they dial 911 right away. So within the first minute, they've not only identified the fire, they've called 911, and they've received a response from the dispatcher. We're 1 minute into it. The dispatcher has to turn that information around. So let's just say that they're on their game, and they do that within a minute. Not typically the situation, but let's say they do it in a minute. We're 2 minutes into the incident. They dial out to the fire department. Fire department gets that information. They're in the station. They start turning out, and then within a minute, they're leaving the fire station. That's 3 minutes. We're into it. These are all ideal situations that are practically impossible. We arrive on scene because the house just happens to be directly across the street, right? And so we arrive on scene, and we start doing our size up, and that takes us a good minute to walk around the building just to see what we have, because you never want to go into a building that you don't have good situational awareness on. So we walk around the building, we see where the fire is, and we start advancing the line to the door. That line to the door gets us about 1 to 2 more minutes. We're at 5 minutes. Ideal situation. They make entrance, and then if at that point, once they've reached the seat of the fire, they're probably already in the basement, even though they were on the first floor, because we're now 6 minutes into that incident. I would like to share one more statistic with you. There's a number of police officers that are being injured in fires because of the fact that they arrive on scene, lights and siren. They're action-oriented people, just like firefighters are, and because of the fact that they're arriving in an emergency situation, people expect them to do something. So then oftentimes police officers are putting themselves in harm's way in order to facilitate a rescue that they don't have the equipment to successfully provide. So all of a sudden, not only do we have a situation that impacts firefighters, but also other emergency responders. So we're conscientious of this. What buys us some time? Well, you can drywall the whole building. Drywall will give us about 20 minutes. Or you can provide fire protection and suppression. And that offers us the ability, gives us a fighting chance to get inside that building and extinguish the fire without building collapse. That's what it does. So I'm not suggesting that it's going to save us from all fire damage, because it's not. But what it is going to do, it's going to control that fire to the area of origin and give us the opportunity to get in and fully extinguish. That's the best bet. So I hope that paints a little bit of a picture as far as what we're up against, and know full well that our fire stations are positioned in a place that provides the most good for the most people, but not the best response for everybody. So we need to make sure that we're well aware of the fact that sometimes our response is going to be 5 minutes from the time that we leave the barn. And so we're already talking about things like structural collapse. And why do we walk around the building? Because if we see that the fire is in the basement and the people that need rescuing are on the second floor, we might not even enter the first floor. Ladders are going up, and we're starting to go in through the second floor, because that's how we're going to be able to facilitate that rescue without injuring any firefighters or anybody who's an occupant of that building. So a lot of decisions have to be made. There's certain things that can be done in advance of the fire to make it something that we can fight, give us a fighting chance, and that provides us with the best possible outcome when we're controlling that fire at the incipient stages.
Wow, that's great information. Thank you for painting that picture for us. That's very helpful to think about. And I will say that your description of water versus smoke was also extremely instructive to me, because I've never thought about that, and just made a lot more clear how important these sprinkler systems are, and and how many buildings actually don't have them. Very interesting, very helpful. Anybody else have any other thoughts? And Joe, do you have any other thoughts on data collection? I mean, you obviously said who has fire protection, who doesn't. That's a really good place to start. That would be huge just to know that, right? Probably. right?
And we'll look into that as well, because some of that information we do have. I can tell you we're in the process of addressing our records management system to be able to have more information available to us. Because if there's one thing that I do appreciate is the fact that a lot of what we do is going to be data-driven. And people want to know that what we're doing is not just emotional, it's logical. Yes, sir.
And there's probably 100 of these, but, and I apologize that I had to be late here.
I was listening to you on the way in.
Do I? Okay. Well, you know where I was. Are there, I mean, I'm sure there's 1,000 of them on YouTube, but do any of the larger complex, or any of the rental situations have videos that they suggest, require, whatever, tenants to view? Because, you know, we all, you know, anyone who's been tenants or whatever, you get a pile of paper and you're going through 25-page lease, you know, and all that sort of thing. Seems like that would help, because I think a lot of folks, generally for folks who are into apartments for the first time, or you know, second time, or you know, whatever that is, it seems like that might be helpful. And I know that's kind of just such a generic, general thing to say, but I wonder if somebody watching something like that would be helpful to them from a learning perspective on just common things to do, rental, you know, condo units, something like that. I'm not even, I don't know that we would require it or we could require, but it seems like that might be helpful.
I think multimedia in general, you know, Fact TV, awesome resource that we have available to us in the city of Fitchburg. I recommend anybody tune in. The fact of the matter is we could potentially come up with a video and at least provide it bilingually. We do know that 14 to 17% of our population is Spanish speaking. So why not have that available, right? And we have Spanish-speaking firefighters, so why not create that connection? So, no, it's a good point, and one that we can absolutely work on. Hey, Scott, can we put that on our to-do list? Thank you.
Well, I was thinking too, with your conversation about things we could do something that we could offer, either because we do it or we have a consortium put it together, or there's something available out there now that we could offer to complexes or to landlords or something like that to suggest to their tenants to look at, or I don't know if I want to say make it a requirement, but something, you know, seems like it would be helpful.
I think so too, and then to have somebody from this group or multiple people from this group express the reason why that is important. So it's not just the firefighters saying it.
Right.
It's others that are speaking on our behalf.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, well, Joe, thank you so much. Very helpful. And I'm sure we're going to get the copy of the presentation. If you could make sure you sent that to us, Joyce.
I will get that to Joyce in the form of a PDF.
Great. Thank you.
He's gonna give me some stats too. I'll be hounding them till I get them, so.
Joyce is going to send me, she's going to remind me of what I actually agreed to, and then I'll get you those stats.
Because I know where he lives, so.
I live in the city of Fitchburg, you know, just letting you all know.
Okay. So we are going to go to agenda item 8. Thanks, Joe. Nice to see you. And
Thanks for the invitation.
Discussion of ideas on data collection for multifamily needs assessment. Yeah, so obviously we've talked a little bit about fire safety, and then last time we had a building inspection discussion. Joyce, did you have a sense of how you wanted to gather this information, or you just want to do a round robin, or should we review the information that we got from the building inspector, or how do you want to do this?
Well, I think what we want to really talk about is what approach we want to use, how we want to do it, what our time frame is, and what our deliverables would be. So if everybody has ideas, I know we went around and talked about, I did pull the minutes from that meeting just to review some of the things that we talked about. We talked about facade. We talked about loans to do improvements. We talked about grants or matching funds for fire safety. But I really want to hear other people's perspective if we go out to, because I think it's important to get an idea from ownership what they feel they need.
Okay, I just have to, I want to observe that, and maybe I'll check in with you after that. So the regional housing strategy, which is kicking off at the end of this month, the Dane County Regional Housing Strategy is a year-long strategic planning process around affordable workforce housing, is doing a housing needs assessment, and part of it is going to be inventorying all of the, multifamily affordable workforce housing, housing stock in the entire county. And it's going to be doing it by municipality. So I think what I'll do is I'll find out exactly what's in that housing needs assessment, so Fitchburg doesn't have to duplicate that.
But are you only reaching out to programs that are in like tax credit or something like that? Because our goal is to actually look at every apartment unit, because we have what we consider, what's the term? Affordable by nature. Wasn't that the term that was used?
Naturally occurring,
Naturally.
I think it is, by age.
Yeah, no, all the age and the housing stock is going to be inventoried by age and throughout the county. But I'll get a list of exactly what's going to be included in that housing needs assessment. And maybe, and certainly it doesn't hurt to, do a more detailed study. And I'm sure there's a lot of information you're going to want that the consultants are just not doing, but I just, would hate for you to have to duplicate that. Anyway. So, right, but the data collection here is, what is it that we actually want to know about these multifamily units, right? Or are you actually talking about the programs that support these multifamily?
Well, I think our needs assessment will help us determine what type of programming is appropriate for what Fitchburg needs.
Right. So does anyone want to start in terms of what it is that they want to know, based on, what we've just talked about in the last couple of presentations on building inspection and fire safety?
Yes, that's Joe. I think maybe what percentage of renters have renters insurance? I don't know if that's something that we're able to assess, like through insurance companies or what, but that would be a good stat for us to be able to know, because I don't think it would be terribly expensive, but having some sort of like public campaign in addition to like what you can do to keep your unit safe or your apartment safe or your house safe, like get renters insurance. I feel like that should be something that should be just shouted from the rooftop, and like some sort of media should be put behind it. And if we have stats on who rents or who has it, who doesn't, how much it costs on average, what the actual impact of not having it is, testimonies that come with it, like all those things would be helpful in some sort of a campaign if that were to occur.
Yeah, that would be great to know how many people or who has renter insurance or not. That might be kind of impossible because I don't think that's information that insurance companies can give out. And who insurance companies are, I don't know, but maybe that's a conversation with property managers or that would have to be further discussion in terms of how to possibly survey for that. But
And Olivia?
That would be great to know. Yes.
Mike Z here. As a renter in my complex, I have to provide evidence of renter's insurance. That's one of the requirements for the property management and for my lease and everything. So every year annually, I've got to provide, just kind of documentation of that I've got the appropriate coverage that they're requiring. So I think asking that question of kind of the property managers at least would give us a start if they have that same requirement.
And if not, why not?
Great. Excellent. Other questions? Other data, other information you'd like to see? Marshall?
I I guess for me, having worked in affordable housing with communities, getting the buy-in from the owner of the building would be essential to get something done and get our program up and running. So I would love to see, I mean, they called out in our assessment a number of buildings that had problems, asking those owners what it is they would like to fix about their property. Maybe it's the siding, maybe it's the roof. At the same time that you're getting them buy-in to guide this program, perhaps they would be able to provide for us details about the building. How old is the furnace? How old is the roof? How old are the windows? Any other kind of details that are kind of important to the safety and age of the building as it's gone down. I mean, I don't think you get carpeting out of them because it would change by unit sometimes, but still some of those more essential structural things I think would be a help. And then, if they're going to be able to guide this program and maybe come up with some reasonable money to make some changes, they might give us the information rather than just throwing it in a circular file when they get it. So
right, that's a great point. Like, well, we're thinking about putting a program together that will have money. What do you need?
Well, the other thing that I would ask as you're going around trying to get this information from all of these landowners is the city of Fitchburg getting funding for this so they can hire someone to go and interview people? Is this going to be more of a voluntary kind of thing? Are we mailing a flyer to all owners of record? I mean, how are we going to gather this information? It might be nice to get some information from the residents of these questionable buildings, ask them about their experience living there too. So then you would have some idea who are responsive owners and who are not. I mean, sometimes by record, you can see someone is out of state, but not always. So that's my kind of 2 cents on it.
That's great. That's very helpful, Michelle.
Marshall, you brought up a great suggestion, and Mike and I did put some funding in the budget for next year to hire a consultant or a professional to help us work on this initiative. So you're headed in the right direction. We just really wanted to get your perspective before we got too far into this as to being our experts, what your thoughts are. And I think Mallory, you probably, you've got a lot of experience too. And we talked a little earlier about some ideas you had. So I'm going to put you on the spot.
Okay. Well, I was just thinking about something since we're talking about fire safety. I walked through one of our projects, Fitchburg Springs, about 15 years ago, I think, when we had a fire there. And that's a fairly large property with quite a few units. And that was caused by a grill on somebody's deck that they had decided to put in the storage unit that was also on the deck, and it caught the building on fire. And so it's not something that I typically think of until I go and look at the property after the fire. And it's amazing how much damage can be caused. And this is a building that had a sprinkling system. And you think about those buildings that have nothing. I know that from conversations that I've had, typically, what I've been told, at least from our experience, typically fires originate in the kitchen, they originate from the stove. So it's important to have fire suppression above the stove. And so one of the things that we do as a matter of course is make sure those fire suppression units are installed. You can even get aftermarket products that you can put in apartments. And I've done those for my children who are building apartments who don't generally put those things in. But when they're renting those units out, it's important to have that. The renters don't even know they exist, but you can just pop them in under the stove. So when you're talking about retrofitting, it could be as simple as providing funds for that and making sure that that those suppression units are available. And I think finding out exactly, and I'm not sure how you're going to find out unless you go door to door and talk to the property owners, but how much of our old housing stock has inadequate fire suppression? I think that's pretty important. I've walked through quite a few fires, just to be pretty horrified at the result, even when you do have an appropriate fire suppression system in the building. Some of the other things that, and this is not some of the things that we have done or are doing with our foundation for our residents. One of the things is nutrition and providing healthy food options for our residents. And we actually provide and grow the food and bring it to our properties, at least in the Madison and close areas. And we're trying to expand this. This is our first year in doing that, but we deliver fresh food to our residents and they get it for free with information on how to prepare, nutritional value, et cetera. And it's gone over fairly well this year. So hopefully we'll be able to expand that, but that's something for our residents that, you know, we provide and there's no cost to them. Another thing that we've thought about for the residents, not necessarily for the property owners, is microlending and putting a microlending system in place to help residents when they're confronted with a crisis, like their car broke down, they don't have enough money to make the repairs, they can't get to work. You know, somebody would like to further their education, they don't have the funding to do that. So that's the second part of our foundation. We haven't started that particular program yet, but that's something that I think our children are going to get involved in and begin that micro lending program. So those are a couple of things that we do for our residents. They're not necessarily focused on the property owners, but they're focused on our residents and how we can make their lives better.
That's great, Valerie. Is the name of the foundation the Gorman Foundation, or what's the name of your foundation?
Yep, the Gorman Foundation. I'm not even sure what the appropriate, actually it does have a fancy name and I can't remember what it is right now. But the program's called Healthy Food Initiative. And yeah, the foundation has a name and I'm not even quite sure what it is. So I apologize for that.
No, that's quite all right. I do have to ask you one question. You said, you know, you can just put something up under the stove and help with fire suppression. What are you talking about in terms of like?
So it disperses a powder and it would put out a fire.
Okay.
And I've gone and you can get them on Amazon. You can get them, I think, at Home Depot. But I was concerned when my kids they built some properties and I'm like, you've got to provide some fire suppression because I know from experience that those are where the fires begin is generally on the stove.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. I mean, right. I mean, I think fire protection in the units, but what kind of fire protection? This whole conversation makes me want to go home and check all my fire protection in my house.
Right. Yeah.
Where is that fire extinguisher on the first floor? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, right. And I think maybe also, right, finding out a list or being able to, it would be great to have out of this, right, a list of things that you can do that are small like that. You know, what are the things that you can do?
Or providing a fire extinguisher in the hallway.
Right. Exactly. Right. What are some, what are some small things that folks can do and then maybe, right, that they don't have? Fire extinguisher, fire alarms, batteries, all of these things, right? Yeah, that would be good to get that as refined as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else want to jump in?
Yep.
And
so I loved Mallory's I think the point is more of like a PSA. So it's a public service help. So it's not just fire. It's not just a reactive, but the food, but also, do you have a fire escape plan? Your fire extinguishers. I mean, I can tell you that I don't know if we have a fire extinguisher. And I mean, I'm not opposed. I just never thought of it until it's something that's brought up in these conversations. And if we do, my husband knows where it is. I don't. So like, what are some things that we can educate? That's not just like you have to do this. We need to retrofit anything, but what can we do as a whole? Do we do a fire escape? Does the apartment building have the proper exit signs? Like, what are some things that they are missing? And it might not even just be a bad thing. Like, I love Mallory's, how about food? What can we provide or assist you with beyond things that are going bad? What is something like microlending? You hit it right on the head. It's not just fire. It's not just reactiveness. And I don't know how to tie it in to our initiative here, but I mean, healthy housing initiative. I mean, we're going to the right direction, but what do we have to do to kind of tie it together to provide that type of solution to our residents that might not be even aware that that exists?
Yeah, that's a great point, Jennifer. Trying to combine this or somehow make it so it's not just about fire, but it's really more holistic.
So I'll see if I can tie it back to the initial question of data collection. Have we surveyed tenants like broadly, like just a widespread survey of apartment unit tenants? Like, is that within the realm of possibilities, or anybody that does that? Because if we're addressing all these issues of like safety, food security, satisfaction with your landlord, et cetera, I'm wondering if in the same way we collect that data on, youth in surveys through the county, like, is there somebody doing it, or is there some sort of way to do it that gets us that information that we might need, even if it's not, full scale, every single tenant answers it, at least do a broad kind of survey of different parts of the city just to understand what the temperature is.
Yeah, I don't know of a survey that's being done. Public health might have something that approximates some of this, because they have housing is a huge area in public health that they are looking into or becoming much more involved in.
Also just thinking about that, the Tenant Resource Center too, right? Like they're there to advocate on behalf of tenants. Like maybe they have some sort of data that might be useful to us as a committee in terms of like.
Certainly they're intimately involved with all of the potential, resident issues that could come up, because that's what they do for a living. So they would be really, Joe, that's a great point. That would be really helpful.
Yeah, perhaps it would be possible to get from them like some specific data on Fitchburg, like if they review any of their, case loads that they've dealt with, or like could we request from them, what have you gotten from Fitchburg in the past, 5 years or something?
Yeah, Tenant Resource Center.
I apologize. Somebody new coming in, first meeting. Again, thank you all so much for the welcome. Just out of curiosity, 2 questions. One, are we targeting Fitchburg as a whole, everybody? And then with that, do we know, and have there been stats, and perhaps the building inspector, when they came and talked to everybody last meeting, do we know how many different communities or complexes are around Fitchburg, and roughly how many residents or tenant families we're going to be servicing?
We know the number of units we have. So he asked if we have an idea of the number of people we would be serving. We do know the number of units that we have, and I've been trying to get some data on our affordable units, because we want to stay on top of how long they're in programs, when they're going to be coming out, what's going to happen. I think I found a kind of an inventory of the properties that are in tax credit programs, but it's really hard to get information on when they're coming out and what the plans are for when they're coming out of those programs. So
the regional housing strategy will do that.
Pardon me?
The regional housing strategy is going to do that. We're going to be inventorying all the tax credit developments, and when they're coming out of tax credit, when their restrictions are up.
Oh, well, I can start with the list of ones that I found that are in programs, so you'll be ahead a little bit here.
So any other thoughts, anything you can think of? I mean, I think certainly, right, the basic information of age, number of units, building inspection has so much great information capturing that, that we heard about.
Olivia, Mike Z
Yes.
here. I think we've got building inspection, we've got assessing, we've got fire, which I think are all really good data sources, as well as our planning department. So I think part of the work is just getting a good assessment and inventory of that, and then figuring out how we would do a survey of the respective complexes, and then even outreach to residents of those complexes. I think one of the reasons we led off with fire protection here is thinking that as we in the future think about programs, that may not be one that's on the priority list necessarily for the actual property owners, because they may not see a return on investment, on that, as far as it's not like, well, I put in a fire safety sprinkler system, so that allows me to kind of, increase the rent for the property to generate more income and everything. So part of our thought process, and even just asking the question and starting the conversation, is as we get data, and I think Marshall had a great idea there as far as getting the owner and the management company's perspective on what are they looking to do. Could we almost kind of be a collaborative partner to say, hey, if you're already looking to renovate and do some things in your property that are more of those new kitchens, bathrooms, carpet, paint, a lot of those cosmetic things, could we bring a financial tool to the table to focus on the life safety? And I think the Maple Lawn Apartments are a perfect example when our friends from Royal Capital, Kevin and Terrell, came to us. One of the things we talked about with them from the get-go, because they were basically creating brand new units with the renovation that they were doing, utilizing a critical tool, the Section 42 tax credits. But one of the things we talked about them in the first meeting was that it was really important for us as a community to look at upgrading the fire safety system there. And they were able to come up with that cost-effective way to do the soffits at the ceiling and the walls there to install a fire safety sprinkler system. So that's where we've kind of had the idea of, could we be a collaborative partner here to move forward a priority for our community, which we think would have a payback for us with calls to service, and also just from a pure life safety standpoint. Because when Maple Lawn did that building, we were very pleased when we took that to CETA, that was a real priority, and people said that we really wanted to try and upgrade the fire safety systems for our older affordable housing stock to bring it up to kind of current standards. So hopefully it can be part of the mix of our future conversations going forward with whatever programs we would look to devise in the future.
Well, this, Brian, maybe it seems to me the discussion from the building inspection side was, we're picking up, hundreds of units out of the town of Madison that are coming in that probably are not up to or even close to Fitchburg standards in a lot of cases. I think that was the discussion there. But also a lot of the issue isn't necessarily with the larger complexes where they're interested in issues like insurance, because, for obvious reasons. But maybe there is a way for a lot of those 4s and 8s that we hear about that aren't up to where we want them to be, that are currently in the city, to incentivize them to get it, or to work with contractors or folks who do this kind of work to put together some kind of program, or not even program, but some way to incentivize contractors to work with those folks. It seems like there's a place to go there that can help both sides, I would hope.
One thing I was thinking of, because I've been recently working with, and I can't remember if Elevate Energy and Sustain Dane, that partnership that they're working on, is in Fitchburg. But one thing that would be interesting to know is electric versus gas stove. And, when things were last upgraded and updated. I kind of also have an interest in, like, what percentage are mom and pop ownership versus, local versus absentee landlords. And for those of you who don't know, this company called Organization, it's a multi-state organization, nonprofit based out of Chicago and Madison, but Elevate Energy, they're called Elevate Energy, and they partnered with Sustain Dane to do a program where they're working with mom and pop, sort of naturally occurring affordable housing. They've done some units on the north side of Madison, and I think they're working on the south side too, or maybe they're just working on the north side right now. But and they might be working in Sun Prairie, where they're actually asking if they can do sort of an energy audit of the units, and then they have some funding that will help the property managers update the heating and cooling in the units. I think it's internal to the unit. I don't know. Maybe it's also, no, they're actually doing a giant co-op down on the campus. They're actually completely redoing the HVAC on one of those older co-op buildings very close to campus. But they're doing some really interesting stuff. So they would be good to reach out to. And I think Elevate Energy has someone on their board or somewhere where they're actually prioritizing this and then providing some of the funding for these retrofits for these apartment owners. And they're only identifying buildings that are actually occurring affordable housing, but so. Anybody else have any thoughts on ideas for data collection or things that you would like to know from this survey or outreach that the city's going to do with the consultant?
This is all anecdotal, but I have run across on occasion some tenants of units who have had issues with their water. And I don't know how widespread that is, but I think if there's any like sort of safety, quality of life type of issues, I'd like to know if there's some sort of way to assess that. And I'm also just thinking about like what's going on in Jackson, Mississippi right now, right? Mm-hmm. So hopefully, we don't have people in Fitchburg who are going through things like that. But I had actually met somebody like a year or two back who had like issues with her water. So again, I don't know if this is like a fluke or if it's a one-time thing or if it's regular, but I would be interested in knowing if that's commonplace.
Water and air quality. Is air an issue too? I mean, I don't know how you actually determine that, but yeah, certainly water sounds. Now, I think you guys who does the water testing in Fitchburg? You guys have your utility.
Got our own utility, water utility. Right. Mm-hmm.
So if you come up with any other ideas, feel free to email me. We're kind of getting close to our time here. We have another meeting at 6:30. No? Oh, it's been taken care of. Sorry about that. So I thought we needed to be done early tonight.
It's okay. It's fine. Unless folks have any other thoughts they want to share, but I think we're wrapping it up here. Yeah.
I was just going to say the last thing on this topic, Olivia, if we could, Joyce and I offline coordinate with you on that scope of work for the regional housing strategies there and the data collection for that'll be helpful for us.
Yeah. Now, I can't remember, did building inspection cover things like, I know it was like related to safety exits but did they have like, I mean, if the windows like are broken or, they're drafty or something, is that something that I can't remember if he reported on windows. It seemed more like exit and entrance and carpet and walls and water and mold. Anyway, windows.
Olivia, they, if you recall, they talked about the tenant's bill of rights or the developer bill of rights that changed before they could be proactive and go around and look at and do
Right.
inspections, and now they're reactive, so they basically have to be invited into a building on a complaint basis. So I don't know if, I'm sure if there's a cracked window or something like that, they would be invited in to look at that. So, we were basically just asking them to kind of give an overview of the conditions of things that they saw and ways that we could help to address those conditions.
Right. Well, maybe we could capture that as part of Marshall's idea which is, how old is your furnace, roof? And did you replace your windows? Or, I don't know. But... Okay. So, do you want to do the report out from the department? Item number 9. Is there anything else you wanted to share with us? Any updates?
We're continuing to work with H&A advisors on the rent-to-own townhome. We've been asked by administration to kind of take a step back there and just do some information gathering and working with Mike and Steve from H&A on kind of what would it take from a staffing resources to manage that program. And so one of the things that we're doing is we're reaching out to the Dane County Housing Authority, and we're going to hopefully get an audience with Karen over there just to kind of share the mechanics of the program and the overview, just to get their perspective on it, although they don't necessarily have the staffing capacity to oversee a program like that. But then we're also going to talk to Lori Heinemann's group at the Madison Development Corporation. I think there's just some questions here about if we would launch a program like that, what additional resources would it take from both our, not only for Joyce and I, but also for finance and legal with the city of Fitchburg. So we're just stepping back to do a little bit more information gathering on that. We're hoping that we'll get kind of the green light from administration to go to the next step with some kind of legal perspective that would provide a little bit more of the parameters and kind of what type of agreements we would have with a program if we were contracting with a builder and a management company to do a specific project for us. So we're hoping maybe if we get to that stage, that would answer some of the questions that administration is posing right now. So we're continuing to work on it. It's going a little slower than what we would like, but some important questions that we just have to get some additional information and answers for.
Great. It's a big lift for sure. Lots of things to think about. Mm-hmm. I know when the county has had conversations about expanding their Affordable Housing Development Fund to include other things like rehab, and it's a huge staffing issue. Just having to, just one little, very different. Yep.
Yeah. I think one of the concerns here is, since we have TIF increment for housing, but that is intermittent and sporadic as far as when we would have those resources. So I think there is maybe a little concern that we can't necessarily create a new staffing position because we wouldn't have the kind of certainty of ongoing funding, going forward. So that's why they asked us to kind of take a look at a model of, is there some other entity or agency that we could, let's say, contract with, so that way we would have more of a certainty of what our expenses would be, let's say, over the 10-year period of the program of the rent-to-own. If it took that long for all of them to transition out to, traditional mortgage and financing. But Mike and Steve are great to work with, and they're already kind of brainstorming and trying to provide us with information and answers to some of the questions. So we'll keep at it, and we'll report back at the next meeting.
Awesome. I have a few housing updates, but I'm going to actually send them to you. They're from the Housing Access and Affordability Division. On the Core 2.0 program, Dane Core 2.0, which provided emergency rental assistance. But I'm actually going to send those to you right after we get off this phone call. And then we have a new program where there's about $1 million to support a tiny home project. Yeah, so, but as soon as we get off, I'll send those to you because I don't have the details right in front of me, and it's late. It's 6:30. So any other thoughts or questions or comments? Thank you for that update, Mike. I know everyone's eager to see that project move forward. It's a very exciting project. Any other thoughts?
Just a couple announcements. Our next meeting is Monday, December 12th. And the WIDA conference, WIDA Housing Conference, September 28th and 29th. Looks like a great lineup if anybody's interested. And it's going to be in person and an online version as well. So just wanted to let you know that.
Awesome. But we can adjourn the meeting, but can I just check in with you, Mike and Joyce, after this and stay on for 1 or 2 minutes or regarding the regional housing strategy? Or do you have to go to your other meeting?
No, we're good.
Okay.
We can
great.
stay.
Okay, so I'm going to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Thank you so much, everybody. Great to see you. Thank you so much. Nate, I'm so glad you're joining the team. It's awesome to have your expertise, and it's great to see you again. And yeah, and look forward to seeing you next time.